But it is funny. People tend to have an opinion about why somebody would use a bookshelf as a video background. But yeah, and you're using a mountain as a background, Loan. So what's the symbolism? What's the symbolism in that?
Oh, that's a good question. So have you seen, maybe come across or ever seen my logo, company logo? Okay, so it's actually a sunrise, right? So you see there's like in the middle something that looks like a mountain, but also could be like what's it called? An arrow for directions and GPS, like directions and a house, right? So you see that in the middle, and then you see a sun, a half of a sun with some sunbeams. So it
Yeah.
actually stands for the symbols is excellence, growth, development, impact, and life, compassion. Actually, a lot of things combined into one, but it's quite simple.
Ah,
Maybe I'll share it with you after the
yeah, yeah.
session.
I'm checking it out right now.
Yeah. I just wanna for the listener and the viewer list a few facts about you, Loan. So yeah, you were born and raised in Denmark, and you're a certified professional coach, a leadership and business consultant, and a soft skills trainer. You have over 10 years of leadership experience in Asia, having held different leadership roles in Vietnam, Cambodia, and other Southeast Asian countries. And the thing is, you've used that expertise over the past decade in helping turn around multi-million dollar multinational companies. And of course, this deep passion for leadership and people has led to your newly published book called Powerful Leadership: How to Build Dream Teams, that I just want to mention again for the sake of the listener or the viewer who might want to find this book and read it. Where you, of course, share the most effective practical tools that leaders can apply immediately to achieve outstanding results. Now, the thing is, I could go on forever with this list, but I just want to mention lastly that apart from all of this, you're also a passionate philanthropist and has over 12 years of experience as a volunteer chairwoman for an orphanage in Vietnam and other NGOs like the Danish Consumer Council. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add right off the bat, otherwise I have a few questions myself. Do you have anything to add to my list, or can we just fire away with questions?
I think it's too long already. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, okay. So maybe elaborate just a little bit, right? Because I mean, I know we've had a conversation before about this leap of faith that you took at some point in your life. So let's start there, right? So at some point you I mean, you have an educational background from Denmark. You're living in Denmark. You are pursuing a career within a certain corporational structure, and then suddenly this leap of faith to Southeast Asia instead. So where did this come from? What made you start this part of your journey?
Where should I start? Where did it all start? The leap of faith? Why Vietnam? So I was 27. I think I told both of you, right? When I worked for Singapore Airlines, my biggest dream when I studied business economics and auditing was, of course, to work for the big fours, right?
Right.
Pricewaterhouse, KPMG, and Deloitte, but it wasn't my destiny, right? So I got all these rejections, which eventually led to Singapore Airlines. And I was excited. So I was like, wow, this is a big company and I get to do accounting. And so that's where it all started. So after a couple of years working, with the accounting and what I studied, I realized that, wow, every single day, people booking ticket, traveling, that inspired me to, hey, maybe I should try to get some international work experience as well. And that would look great on my CV. And then, of course, as I'm Vietnamese, but born and raised in Denmark, I thought Vietnam would be the first choice, right? So I could learn about the culture as well and the language. So that was the plan, and I moved to Vietnam. I was lucky to to get a job with a Danish company. So it was a natural step and move for me. Signed a 2-year contract, and then totally fell in love with the country. And here I am, still on my 11th year. And this amazing opportunity just opened so many doors. And so yeah, I was happy that I took this leap of faith, and it has been a big, very interesting adventure, and the greatest, I would say, personal development journey for me personally. So a little bit of background. Yes.
Go ahead.
What was the initial reaction from your family? You grew up in Denmark. You might have spoken the language at home. But when you said, hey, mom and dad, I'm gonna pack my things and I'm gonna head back to the homeland and take it from there. I remember personally when I made the decision, it was kind of a big deal for my mom and dad. They had quite a negative feeling about me going so far away to a culture that they felt at the time I didn't know much about. And so I had to battle that initially. What was your family's kind of take on this big decision? It's been a pretty big decision to just pack up and go to a new country. So
Yeah, well, I have a lot of people ask me that same question, right? Well, how did your parents react? And so my mom was actually she was quite positive and she was like, oh, that's cool. You get to be closer to your grandmother and all my siblings, your uncles and aunties, and that's pretty cool. Learn about the culture and the language. So, but my dad, he didn't see that coming, right? He saw like, oh, Lon, because my parents, they grew up in poverty and never had access to education. So my dad's expectation was, okay, I want my kids to go to school. And growing up, my dad was also always very strict. You should study hard, don't take anything for granted. You're very lucky to be in Denmark and have good education. So work hard, get a stable job. And of course, he wanted me to graduate from university. That was his biggest dream or wish. And then I should get married and have start my own family, right? Stability and normal, so to speak, life. And it didn't really go that way, right? So, but I mean, because it was only a 2 year plan. So for them, it was like, yeah, okay, we support that. I didn't tell them that, back then that, hey, I'm gonna go for 11 years and I'm not sure when I will be back. Maybe that would be like a different response. Yeah.
Was there a specific time when you just knew I'm gonna stay in Vietnam, right? Because maybe in the beginning you're thinking, all right, I'll stay here for a couple of years just to get this on my resume. And so is there a sort of a significant point in time, as I said, where you just knew, no, this is actually gonna be for the long run?
Good question. I think there were many moments that reassured me or actually gave me this very confident or comfort that, oh, this is the place, So, but I'm still until now not 100%. I just know that I love being here and I like the people, I like the work that I do, I love my clients, and so I'm still here. But the thing is that I think it's a big privilege, right? Especially for overseas Vietnamese, that we have the opportunity, the privilege to live in different countries and move around. And I get to see my family every year. So it's not that, and even now with FaceTime, it doesn't feel like it's not that hard. I FaceTime my mom quite regularly. I text her every day. So I feel that we are actually stronger, connected now that I moved so far away from them, right?
I think part of that is also when we're close to certain people. We see them all the time. We tend to, not always, but we kind of take people for granted. And then when there's, vast distances that separate you from loved ones, and you appreciate more the time that you can't connect and the times that you had
Absolutely.
together. So I think that helps. And I don't know if you remember, when I came back to Vietnam in 2008, we were still using those scrub off phone cards. And I remember buying these 100,000 dong, cars or 500,000. You couldn't see their face because we weren't really using, at least at that time, video chat. And I remember the phone calls from my mom were very brief. And there was always, when you were running out of time, there was this little voice would pop up that would say, "Hey, you have 1 minute to go with your phone call." And those were my early experiences in Vietnam. I don't know if you had similar experiences with those phone calls, but now with video chat, it just makes it, it's almost like you're talking to them, I don't want to say they're next door, but you still get that feeling that you're still connected with people, especially with video.
Yeah, she FaceTime me now. They have like a small garden where they grow vegetables. I get to follow the vegetable growing big, and then she's like very proud. See, when you are back in Denmark, you will have like homegrown tomatoes and things like that. So
No,
it
and
feels like,
I think your mom and my mom are friends because every time I call my mom, she's always showing me her garden too. That's hilarious.
yeah. No, I
Now,
do
what?
remember your story about the scrap
Yeah,
card, right? Yeah, when I
yeah, yeah.
growing up in Denmark, my aunts, my mom, they would go to, the kiosk, right, and buy those like for 100 crowns, Danish crowns or 200. And then they would call my grandmother. And they always goes, "Hey, Lon, say a few words, say hi to your grandmother. We only have 2 minutes left or something, right, before it goes out." So yeah, really nostalgic.
No, but I guess, I mean, a lot of what you do also, I know that from our last conversation together a week ago, Loan, also has to do with bridging cultural gaps, right? And I guess, before we dive into that, I don't know if that's the case, but I could also imagine that going to the home country of your parents and your ancestors also gave some, some further understanding of the differences between, for instance, Vietnamese and Danish culture, which, I don't know, has that helped you in terms of doing what it is you do, bridging cultural gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming here to Vietnam, being a Danish Vietnamese, but I didn't understand the culture. I didn't have the industry, like the technical knowledge or expertise. So I was met with a lot of, "Hey, what is she doing here? She's Danish," right? Was the response from my Vietnamese colleagues. And she's very young. She doesn't have much work experience, doesn't understand anything about healthcare, the industry here. So how can she be like a leader and a manager? So I think what helped me was understanding and bridging the culture. That was really where I added value to the company because it's a foreign company, it's a Danish company. So that was, I would say, pretty much the biggest difference that I like the value that I added to the company, helping the local Vietnamese people understanding the Western culture and helping the Western leaders, professionals, colleagues understand the Vietnamese as well. So I think being able to communicate and understand both parties and people, right? I was able to help them get closer to each other and collaborate more effectively. So I think now with your community now, right, a lot of people maybe they are seeking those opportunities and maybe have some insecurity about, hey, how can I best add value and what would be the opportunities, things like that.
All right, yeah, and we're definitely going to dive into some of these cultural differences because, as you mentioned, a lot of the people who are following our community or members of our community right now are people who would like to work for Western companies, right? So this is obviously extremely important and interesting for a lot of people. I just want to ask, before we dive into that, one last component to your story that we've talked about before. This, the final leap of faith where you move out of corporate and actually start on your own. So what happened here? What made you do that? And has it been worth it?
Okay. It was kind of natural. I always wanted to have my own company, to be my own boss, to do my own thing, but never had the courage to do so, and always had the big imposter syndrome that I needed 20, 30 years of experience to be a successful entrepreneur. So I always like waited, no, it's not enough, it's not enough experience I have, I'm not good enough. And so, but it's just like over 2 rounds. Maybe I haven't shared this with you. I got laid off, even though despite great success in my corporate career, still twice crisis and things, and I was laid off twice. And I think, oh my God, I really hated this experience and the feeling of working so hard and being so invested and passionate about what I do, but it's that's not a guarantee for me staying in the job, right? So when COVID hit, I decided, okay, I'm really passionate about the coaching. And one more factor that helped me with this was actually one friend and then a second friend. They approached me and said, "Hey, Luan, I want you to coach me and I'm willing to pay you money for it." And so at that time, I was like, "Coaching? What? I'm not a coach." So, but let me hear what's your challenge. Maybe if I can help, I'm happy to do. So they share with me and I said, okay, well, I definitely think I'm confident I can help you with this. So that's where that kind of confidence led me to, okay, maybe this is the right thing to do. Maybe I can start. So I did that while having a full-time job. And then so it was really safe, right? I didn't like jump out on the deep water yet. I was still having a full-time job and doing coaching in the weekends. So until I reached a point where I hated to say no to clients who wanted to work with me more, right? Like during the weekdays and not only in the weekends. And so I asked my employer, hey, would you be okay if I work part-time? Because I really want to continue doing more coaching, but more than just the weekends. And it didn't work out for them. So that was the moment where I was like holding my breath. Is it now? Am I gonna resign now and go full time on my thing? And I eventually decided to do that. And luckily, I'm still here in my third year and doing it full time now, coaching, training, mentoring, and consulting on leadership and soft skills. So
And every time, I mean, following up on this, every time we talk, I always hear, leadership, people, people, people. So, in terms of what it is you do now, why this passion about people and leadership exactly? Why are people so important? Why are you so passionate about people and leadership?
yeah, a funny story. I used to work, when I was managing this company, and I think I'm just naturally a people person. So of course I focus a lot on, the people, the team, developing people, developing the team. And then at some point, one of my former bosses told me, "Hey, Lon, you're focusing too much on people. Focus more on the profit, on generating profit, right?" And so I was thinking to myself, maybe he's right, but it still didn't feel right in me. But eventually, over multiple rounds, the approach, me focusing on the people, was the key factor that led to the successful turnarounds. So I have
Right.
that confidence now that I did the right thing by focusing on people.
Mm.
And that eventually led to the turnaround. So meaning profit. So not by focusing on profit, profit will come, but by focusing on the people, profits will be there, right? So I think now I can confidently say if you focus on people, you will be able to generate the biggest profit. But if you don't, because eventually who will be the people generating those? They are the people in your company, right? So leadership is really all about generating result or creating result through people. So if your people are like at this level, you can create this kind of profit. But if they are at this level, higher level, then you'll be able to generate better result, productivity, efficiency, and all of that. So therefore, so that's the one thing about profit. Another thing about the people side of it is it sounds very romantic, right? And I know people laugh when I say it, but leadership is really the thing that will help our world become a better place. So I see leaders now as a responsibility. They are responsible for the well-being of people in their organizations. So when we have great leadership, we have people who thrive, right? We have great well-being. They are positive. They are energized. They come back and bring that energy to their families, right? And so they have happy family, happy personal life, and it's just like a very powerful ecosystem. But if they are not great leaders, what they will create is stress and anxiety, and that will, spread as toxic and poison to the people in the organization. And what is it that the people working in this organization will bring back to their families? Stress, zero energy, right? So I think it's very much about life quality. You have great leadership that you bring back, and at the end, what you will have is the world, right? The society, the community. So I think everybody should be talking about leadership.
If you don't mind me asking, how since you've been training in leadership in Vietnam, how much do current companies in Vietnam, whether it be a foreign company or a Vietnamese company, how much do they embrace this idea that leadership is important that it not only is good for developing the people, but developing the people, thus the profits. Is there that they coming to that understanding that there's this that actually leadership training is should be mandatory and a very important part of the growth of the business? Have they come around to realize that yet?
Should I be honest, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to say yes, but I that's why I quite optimistic because we are not there yet. We are not there yet, and unfortunately, what I see right now is we have less Vietnamese local companies that really see the importance and how leadership training will actually make a difference for them and something that they should prioritize and invest in, right? So right now, the foreign companies, they see that. So that's something that is very natural for them. Yes.
Mm.
And if we talk about why is it that all the multinational companies, they have a whole department, learning and development department. They have big budget for training, internal and external for coaches
Mm.
and trainers, right? So sometimes I would ask people, is it the egg and chicken thing here, right? So the multinational companies, they invest so much in training and leadership, people development. That's why they are so successful. Or do you think they are so successful because they focus on leadership and training,
Right.
right? And I think they're really smart. They know exactly how to spend every single penny, right? So it must be because leadership and people development is a key factor for them to generate, to achieve their goals and maintain or retain their talents. It's a strategic move. That's why they do it. Yeah.
Mm. In your consulting, do you also take this data and do you also kind of teach local Vietnamese companies that, hey, these guys have a fixed budget, they allocate, this amount of money every year, and they have been able to measure, quantitate the direct result of building people, investing in people, and this is the output we've gotten from the people. Is that something you communicate to Vietnamese companies or?
So I try. Of course, I don't want to come across as being like teaching or educating them. This is what you should do. No, what I do is I just try to post organic of what I do
Mm,
with
mm.
my clients, and they can see. Oh, see, we actually see the results here and the progress and the impact, and hopefully they see it and they will be inspired to also believe in it, right? So
Yeah.
it will come more naturally or organically.
I just want to ask one question with regards to the data and how important leadership is. So, according to some research, statistics actually show that 85 or around 85% of financial success comes from personality, ability to communicate, negotiate, and lead. Do you agree with this based on your experience? Is the proportion so high, 85%?
I use this a lot in my training and my workshops as well, just to help people see how important it is. Personality, communication, ability to negotiate, and leadership skills. And why is that? So, in my experience, working in different teams in different countries and cultures, yes, the ones who are receiving the most opportunities, promotions, and salary raises is actually really logic. It's because they create more value, they're able to create more impact, right? And they're more effective. They can work with different stakeholders, influence, persuade, negotiate, lead, and that eventually will create better results. So, unfortunately, on the other hand, we have extremely good, technically knowledgeable people, but when their ability to communicate and influence and collaborate is not, they're really struggling, then they are really the ones like who won't be offered the same opportunities and salary raises, for example. So it is financial success. And yes, the numbers indicate the reality, I would say, in my experience, being here working in leadership and people development for 11 years. So personality, are you likable? Do people trust you? Do they respect you? Do they want to work with you? Are they inspired by you? So these kind of things. Yeah.
And this is really interesting, right? Because usually when you talk to people, and this doesn't matter if we're talking to people from Vietnam or some from my own network in Denmark with regards to recruitment, there usually is a lot of focus on hard skills compared to soft skills. And so it's very interesting, and I think for a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast, to actually become aware, and for me as well, to become aware of how important the development of soft skills is. Either if you're already, in the midst of pursuing a career and you want to become a leader, but also if you just, if you want to acquire your dream job, soft skills are actually to some extent more important, or at least you should spend disproportionately more resources on developing soft skills. So this is really interesting. I want to ask, in your own experience as a leader, what's the biggest mistake you've made yourself during your time as a leader? The biggest mistake or the biggest mistakes?
The book that you mentioned before, I try to, I have a whole list of, because what I've been doing over the years is journaling. So I think this is a habit that I also would love to recommend this to the listeners who might find it useful. Journaling, daily reflection of what went well and how could you improve. So every time I made like a mistake, I would write them down. Oh, what did I learn from this? And how do I want to do it better next time? So I'm extremely focused on learning and growth, right? The biggest mistake would be, I would say now talking about leadership would be promoting, can I say promoting the wrong person, or maybe like not managing the expectations well and not preparing that person well to become a manager. So eventually he didn't succeed in his role as a manager. And I take, full responsibility because I didn't prepare him well and communicated the expectation clearly enough, and making sure that he actually would be suitable for a managerial role. So yeah, even though he was now again talking about the soft skills and leadership skills and technical skill, right? Or hard skills, extremely technical, knowledgeable person, very nice person, but leadership is a different level. And you need as a manager or leader, if you want to become successful, if you don't love people or don't have the best interest for people, genuinely care about the people or the team, then it's really, really, really hard to be a successful manager. And it's not for everyone, but it can be for many if they really understand and have that compassion and know what it takes to be successful. So for me, I always promote, please look into leadership. It's very meaningful. It can be a lot of fun. It's not just about stress and pressure and responsibility.
Right. And during a job interview, if you sort of want to figure out if people hold some of these soft skills to a satisfactory degree, what would you do? I mean, would you ask somebody to just tell you a story about an experience with working with other people? Or I mean, how do you figure out if people have exactly these soft skills?
So some people they don't have it, but they can learn if they want to, right? So I think the first step is to really share with them what it means to be a manager or a leader, some of the stress, some of the challenges that they may face, and how they are willing to or ready to cope with these or deal with these challenges, right? Some people are really like, yeah, I love challenges. I have a growth mindset. But other people are like, oh, that sounds really, really, really challenging. And I already feel like sweaty and anxious thinking about it. Right now in my life, I just want stability and, just have an easy life, right? Comfortable. So it's not for everyone. But of course, as to be an effective one, try as much as possible to share everything, put everything on the table, right? I see these and I see that, and you may experience something else, but here are something what could be a turn off for some people in leadership roles. But the really good opportunities and growth opportunities and the meaningful things and impact, the fulfilling thing that come from the intrinsic motivational factors are there. So I share everything so they have the bigger picture and they can decide for themselves. I think a lot of the times is also understanding if they have a good mentor or a boss who can be there in the beginning to guide them. That would also encourage them to do it and learn the soft skills that's needed. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So because a lot of, many of the people who have become a member of the VietAssist family, the VietAssist community, are people that are potentially walking into a job interview around the corner, right? Who have a job interview around the corner. So this, some knowledge about exactly what's expected from you and how you can show that you have these specific soft skills. It would be very valuable information for a lot of our listeners, I'm sure. So I want to ask you, what is a successful story that you could share maybe about how you helped a candidate to get the dream job?
Yeah, a successful story. I think this is probably some of the happiest moments as a coach when my clients share with me, I got the job, or like something that they achieve some goals. So when I receive those messages, it really makes me happy. So I had this one. She is actually not a Vietnamese. She's a foreigner living here in Vietnam, and twice. So over the span of like some years, she applied for a leadership role. And every time she would reach out to me, say, "Oh, Loan, I'm preparing for my next leadership role, and I really, really want to get it." Da, 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 da. And so we just have like a normal session, and I prepare some questions for her, and she shared with me her concerns, how she prepared, and then I would help to see where she has her strength, identify her strength, potentially her blind spots. When I observe the person, right, to see when they are energized and when they are like insecure, and where they might get trapped during the upcoming interview. So I show them some of those things, highlight some of the things that her potential employer may want to ask or hear from her. So I ask those questions in advance for her to reflect and really prepare really well. But also I help to share with her some of my own experiences so she can gain a little bit more clarity about what potentially is really, really important that she may have overlooked, or something that she didn't know, so she would feel 100% confident to go to those interviews. And eventually those two times where she reached out to me and she got the jobs both times, right? So I'm really, really happy for her. Yeah.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I have a quick question actually. This is for the vast amount of people within the VietAssist community. I think Vietnamese people, and my realization very early on, and we talked about this during our last chat, Ron, they may come with adequate technical skills, where they fall short often. It's in the emotional intelligence, or the could be body language, it could be lack of confidence. So if somebody comes to you with a desire to become more effective in showcasing who they are, coming across as a very competent employee, through your program and through your experience, how long does it take for somebody to realistically become much more effective at winning, and not winning, but at having a successful job interview? Is it something that you can kind of quantitate for people? It's like, okay, if you come and here's a program that I'm going to build for you, it's going to take you approximately so and so amount of time. Is it, because I know a lot of people say, okay, I want to do this, but is it something that I can fit into my schedule? Is it something that is within a reasonable timeline?
Oh, that's a hard question, huh? So I've had people who had really crazy experience within 8 hours, like one boot camp where they
Mm.
totally changed. Oh wow, that was the thing I needed exactly to learn or to hear during that boot camp, right? So they changed the mindset and how they see things, like their challenges, dealing with setbacks and difficulties. Then there would be other people that would take 3, 6 months even to really, it's I think it's different, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how hungry, how determined, how committed they are, how motivated they are to get that job. If it's like a really dream job and they really like, I'm gonna do everything I can
Mm.
to put in this effort to land this dream job, where others, they are maybe, it's not that important. I think it's different.
Got it. Got it. You mentioned earlier about blind spots, and I wrote down my notes. What are some typical blind spots that employees come with when they sit down for an interview? And I think that's very important, by the way, because I think a lot of us have blind spots in many areas of our lives, and it's important to have a coach who's outside looking in, who can provide you maybe some information that you might not know about yourself,
Yeah.
or don't want to know about yourself, or maybe in denial about yourself. So.
The blind spot thing is also one of my favorite topics to talk about. And it's really a game changer for some people when they are ready to hear and not
Mm.
deny, right? What you said. And I think the answer is already something you shared earlier about confidence and emotional intelligence and people skills. So body language was also what you mentioned, right? Body language, how we use the muscle on our face, our facial expression. So we know that 55% of effective communication is through body language or nonverbal, right? So what I see most of the times, really good, well-intended people, professionals, they work so hard, but somehow they're like isolated. People don't want to work with them because they come across as being arrogant, not approachable, rude even, or yeah. So these are some of the things that talk a lot about, like helping people to see, oh, smile a little bit more, try to, show your enthusiasm a little bit more, or confidence is really important, right? I
Mm.
think how in an interview, if we're really nervous and we are not confident, the chances, of course, to land a job is really, really low. So confidence is such an important thing, right? And how can you build confidence? Well, come to my boot camp. I will share with you.
Yeah, that would of course be the next logical question. How does one, I mean, obviously, you're already hinting to this. Come to the boot camp, actually go through some of this coaching or some of this education, because obviously you cannot just break these barriers in a few minutes, right? But how would one start? So just in overall terms, if somebody comes to you and they demonstrate very clearly that they have a low level of self-confidence, where do you start with a person like that? Well, how would a person like that start his or her personal development?
One of the first things I would say is to know your strengths and your weaknesses or areas of improvement. And then if they can understand that it's okay, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be the smartest person for you to get the job. No one expect you to be perfect, right? So if they can feel confident and comfortable in knowing that no one is perfect, I know what I can bring to the table. I know I have certain skills that they need and they want, that they would value. And some of the other things are things that I'm willing to and continuously improving and growing myself, right? If I have the right mindset, if I have the right attitude, then I think they would be okay with that. So, but a lot of, especially young professionals, they think, oh, I don't have enough experience. I'm not the smartest one in my whole class or whatever, right? So they compare and they get the imposter syndrome. And of course, it's natural as a young person to feel some kind of imposter syndrome. So I think this is the thing that I try to instill, help them to know that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know everything. You need to know what are your weaknesses that you need to improve on and your strength, right? And then just own all of it. And of course, the attitude and the mindset is super important. So as long as you can be kind, you're willing to work with others, you stay curious and open minded, you can go a really, really, really long way, right? And be very successful. So I think those are some of the expectations that they need to understand what's important.
I just wanted to add something. The opposite of lack of confidence is overconfidence, and that can be off-putting for a lot of employers. And sometimes people who actually lack confidence overcompensate and come across as being overly confident. What would be cool if along this train of thought would be if you were to kind of, in the future, maybe even consider building a boot camp for some of the VietAssist community members Maybe you could title it charisma on demand or something, where they could learn how to, instantly, I guess, learn the tools, learn enough about themselves. And you use the word, you said weakness, but not really weakness, areas of improvement. I think the rephrasing is very important for people, right? It's less of an attack on the ego when you say areas of improvement for you. But it'd be really cool if you would consider in the future maybe packaging some of the things that you've taught to people at the managerial level. Because most of the people within VietAssist, I'm going to make the assumption that they're not at that level. They're mainly just people who come in and they're at the employee level and not so much a leadership. But of course, not to say that learning leadership skills and leadership mindset. I think that's important for everybody in the organizational chart. It doesn't have to be reserved for the higher you go up. Would that be something you would consider maybe in the not too distant future, maybe packaging something for the members? I'd love to promote it. I'd love to, because I think, when I think about Vietnamese people, I always think plenty of skills, but in the ability to come across as confident, come across as dependable, come across as somebody that would fit culturally within an organization, because cultural fit is a thing that's very new in Vietnam. You come in, you do your work, you shut up. I don't care if you fit within the organization, but especially for those who aspire to work for an international company, fitting in within the culture of the organization actually is very important. And when the hiring manager is doing the interview, they have that in the back of their mind. Does this person fit within our company's culture? So I mean, that's quite a bit there, but I'll let you take it from there, Lon.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking me. Yes, I would be very happy to do this online workshop for the community, and also appreciate you. I see that you post a lot of very valuable information and tools in a community already, and I love that so much, right? I think a lot of people really, I hope that they also show some gratitude and grateful for everything that you do, your time and your efforts building this community, which I see is very valuable. And I see many other groups as well. But this group, the group that you have created, is filled with value. So I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I getting a little red here? A little bit.
So this is of course a buzzword, right? Value. That's basically, we talked about that last week, Loan, that every time we talk about, how can we build out this community, we always, come back to the same word, value. How can we create as much value as possible? But I want to follow up on something that you asked, and you asked about in terms of cultural differences. What are Vietnamese people used to in their own in the Vietnamese corporate structure versus adjusting to, let's say, suddenly working for a Scandinavian company, something that I know a bit more about myself and too, Loan. So let's start out with something that we can all talk about actually. So both Vietnamese work culture and Danish work culture. So just right off the bat, what are the biggest differences in your opinion between these two work cultures?
There is so much to say about culture here. Right? I don't really know where to start. But just right off the top of mind, the first thing I want to say is how Vietnamese, now is not to generalize, right? But in my experience, most of the time, the Vietnamese people, they are very, so let me try to say it in a different way. So they are not used to being invited, to, hey, come with what's your opinion, right? That, for example, in Denmark, right? The hierarchy thing, the organization structure is very flat, right? Everyone is equal, everyone has a voice. So it's normal for everyone. Anyone can come and say to the boss, right? Hey, I'm right now, what you just shared earlier, I may disagree with you, or I have a better idea or a different idea or a different solution or something, right? That would be less likely here for Vietnamese in Vietnam, right? So that's one of the biggest, I would say, differences. So it takes time for the local Vietnamese to learn the difference. And that is actually a very positive thing and expectations that we expect everyone to contribute and engage and be proactive, right? So it's okay to challenge me, even though I'm the boss. If you think a different thing, come and say it to me, right? Don't just be quiet and then at the end of the day, it affects our team result. So of course, even though I'm the boss, I may be wrong sometime, and that's okay.
Right, right. And I think this is growing everywhere in many Western countries, especially Scandinavia. And I want to focus a little bit more on this because, you know, having experience myself, and I know you do too, from Danish universities, for instance. I mean, one thing that you see here is that already during you know your educational journey, you will be confronted a lot with, you know, with having to learn these soft skills. There's a lot of communication. You know, if you go to university, you're going to have to converse with your teachers, right? It's not just a one-way communication. It's almost always two-way communication. There's a lot of group work, a lot of communication. Even negotiation is sometimes becomes a core part of your life as a student here. And would you say that this is much different? I know that it probably is, but to what extent is this very different from Vietnamese education? Because my hypothesis would be that this is actually where it starts. That you educate Scandinavian employees to communicate, and therefore they're already used to it when they move out into the labor market. But Vietnamese people having a different educational structure might not be used to this and might have to pursue further education to learn these skills later. What do you think about that?
You're absolutely right. It is what I see here. It is from the education that we have these mindset, this kind of behavior and habits, right? So it is like people are like molded, formed a certain way, and it's from whether it's from their own family backgrounds, how they grew up, the educational system, or it could be many different things that actually influence them. Luckily, I would say there's a positive thing here and a trend that now with the younger people, they actually more, right? Because they are exposed to more westernized culture and information and things. So with the young professionals, Gen Z, especially Gen Z, I do see they are more open-minded and what's the word? Vocal, right? So it's good. It's very good.
Yeah, and of course it's not as you said before, it's not about generalizing first and foremost, and it's also not about saying that something is better than others, right? Because as you also hint yourself, some of this comes all the way back from childhood, and I think that that's at least something that Lam and I have been discussing a lot, right, in terms of our own family structures and children. And because if you compare Vietnam with Denmark, for instance, the upbringing of children in Denmark or in Scandinavia in general is very soft compared to Vietnam, right? But that also means that there's a lot of communication even from a low age, and that means that children tend to behave less well. And this is also, I think it's difficult to say, right? But also if you compare Danish employees with Vietnamese employees, I think Danish employees are more used to this whole communication structure, but definitely Vietnamese people, from what I've experienced so far, are more disciplined, more competitive, and also tend to be more skilled in general than at least a lot of the Danish labor that I've worked with. I've been running a recruitment business before COVID, right? So I've seen many different people with many different skills, and I would say I've never personally met people that were more competitive and disciplined than Vietnamese people during that time. So that's also something that we have to mention. There are sort of good advantages and disadvantages with these two types of backgrounds. But yeah, and I mean, what about negotiation? Because what I know myself from people I've talked to who are seeking their dream job, negotiation is something that scares a lot of people, right? Because it takes a lot of self-confidence, it takes a lot of training to sit in a room, negotiate, and actually, demand your value, right? To say this is what I'm worth, this is what I want, otherwise, I'm gonna leave the table or whatever, right? How does a person, maybe it's the same answer, but how does a person start out on this type of self-development, learn how to negotiate? How do you teach people to negotiate?
Wow, that's another 4 hour discussion here. So negotiation. I can think of one example. And you did mention one important factor is already confidence. Like if people know their value, which actually not a lot of people know what the heck am I doing here every day? What kind of value do I bring to the company? So what I always recommend people here, maybe useful, hopefully useful for the listeners, is to track really your work. Track the work, track your results, track your progress, the value that you actually bring to the company. And one of my favorite quotes is actually this one, that you are not paid for the hour or by the hour or whatever, right? But you're paid for the value you bring to that 1 hour. So you can be a lot more knowledgeable compared to this other candidate. But if this one actually, by being more effective in navigating the work and adding more value, it doesn't matter how much you know, but it matters more what value that you can create, right? How well you can work with everyone, and how you can bring your knowledge and actually build something with it that is meaningful and impactful for the company. So this is a habit I have been practicing. I learned many years ago. I don't even remember from when, who, but journaling is the one thing, right, that I mentioned to you before. What worked well today? What didn't go so well? Why not analyze a little bit, reflect, and then how am I gonna do it better? Now with me, I'm kind of Danish and I'm kind of Vietnamese. I blah, blah. What's the unique thing I can bring to the company? How can I really add most value? So know your strength, what you are unique, your uniqueness, your skills, and find a ways that it makes sense. How can you help the people in your organization? So for example, to give a practical example, I saw my colleagues how they had a lot of potential, but they were stuck, right? Because they lacked confidence and they didn't get the right jobs or promotions or the work for them to add more value. So when I saw that, I had to kind of show the board of directors, look, we have a lot of potential right here. And they have been in the same situation role for 10 years. We have wasted a lot of potential here, talents, right? We are lucky they are still around. Other people may have left already. So we need to leverage and unleash the potential here. And this is how we're gonna do it. Give them these kind of responsibility, these kind of challenges, this kind of work, and you will reap the harvest, or what is called, like, let them bloom and flourish, right? So for me, I could see that, oh, I have a skill to be able to observe and see what people are great at and put them together in teams to build it. So that was what I did, which one of the reasons why I told you the story that one of my former bosses says, Lon, you focus too much on people. But eventually this was the thing that helped us turn around the business, right? So really, if you're thinking out of the box, tracking and knowing your value, your strength, then you will be in a much better position to negotiate and know, hey, this, what I did last month brought this kind of different and solved this kind of problems or challenges, right? But if you're only doing, what you're supposed to do, a job description, it's really hard to distinguish or differentiate yourself to other candidates. Then people, HR would just look at the salary report. Oh, you are this position, so many years of experience. This is what you should get, right? So I think if each person really analyze it, it's much better for them to know exactly their uniqueness and the value.
Would you say also, Lan, that the ability to communicate the value that you bring? I think culturally, Vietnamese people tend to keep their head down and work. They're really good worker bees, and they're kind of culturally been trained to be humble and not brag and so forth. I'm not saying you should brag, but there's a way to be more vocal and to communicate. Maybe every quarter, every whatever time period with your senior, the things that you've accomplished, the goals that you have set together or communicated to them in the past, and where you are along the way in terms of the value that you've delivered. I think that's also something that a lot of Vietnamese workers could become better at. And again, it's a cultural thing, right? The olden days where you're supposed to just keep your mouth quiet and just work and not complain. But also not to talk a lot about good things about yourself. And that's kind of maybe for the older Vietnamese, maybe not so much for Gen Z. But I see a lot of people, when you think of Western world, they're the Western worker is not so fearful, or they're not, they don't have any issues with communicating their value. But maybe Vietnamese workers are tend to, again, it's kind of ingrained not to talk too much about yourself. And so, is that something you see Vietnamese workers could definitely improve upon?
Yes, yes, you are correct. The Vietnamese, it's really uncomfortable for them to speak up or talk about themselves. But it's actually, you know what? It's not just Vietnamese thing. It is a big challenge here for Vietnamese and something that they need time to learn and adapt, to embrace about themselves, the change, the transformation.
Mm.
But also, growing up in Denmark, I'm not sure about Alexander, but for me, growing up in Denmark with the law of Yande, I don't know if you have heard about it, Anh.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the law of Yande, we have the law with 10 different principles, basically teaching us, telling us that we should not think that we are better than anyone. We should not brag about, things. So that was difficult for me too. And, when I have to like negotiate with my boss and tell him how great I am, I was just like, Yendelo, Yendelo, Yendelo. Oh, I'm not better than, don't think you are better than anyone or you're special or whatever. I had to break out of that, right? But of course, I think there are different ways. It's not, if you think about the word bragging, it has like a negative tone to it, but
Right.
it's really just more like, yeah, it's just different in a humble way. Actually, the greatest advice I got from my former boss when I came to Vietnam, I asked him, what would be the advice you would give me, to succeed in Vietnam? And he said, be humble. So
Mm.
even though I did a lot of the bragging thing, but it was in a humble way. So it was easier for them to digest it and take it well.
Right.
So this is actually something that the Danish culture and the Vietnamese culture have in common, I think, also, because it's very true. We have the law of Yante, and it's one of the things that translates into Danish people tending to be overly private about anything that has to do with their career and their job. And people in Denmark, they don't share with other people if they get good grades in school. They keep it a secret, right? They never talk about salary or anything around the dinner table, or it's kind of rude to ask people what their salary is, or even sometimes to ask what type of job people has is sometimes regarded as too private. I mean, in some circles, other circles are more relaxed, right? But I think this level of humility, it might come from different places, but I think it's actually something that the Danish people and Vietnamese people to some extent have in common, at least from my humble perspective and humble understanding of Vietnamese culture. But yeah, I will ask though a sort of a follow-up about this communication thing. So a lot of people who are sitting out there listening to this podcast now are going to be thinking, all right, so I'm not used to this level of communication. If I suddenly have to work for a Western company, what do I do? So do you have any advice for people who want to start training themselves? Is there anything they can do if they're students at a university, or they're just sitting at home, or they have some kind of other job, but they're pursuing a dream job somewhere else? Can people start training themselves with certain types of exercises, or do something in specific that you could advise right now, right off the bat?
I think now in this day and age, right, we are so privileged, and if we want to learn, we can learn anywhere. We can learn right here. Go on YouTube, go to the bookstore, grab 10 books about communication. Everyone can master communication these days, right? Plenty of resources. So yeah, if people say, oh, they have an excuse why they're bad communicators, it's just because they're not willing to put in the effort and learn really. But all the resources are out there now with Udemy. What are all the educational platforms, right? You can learn any skill, anything, right? And communication is people skills. Communication is the key for everybody, I would say, if they really want to achieve their goals, whatever goals they are, or whichever industry. Communication is a skill if they want to advance, fast track their careers. Communication. And I think, and Lam, you mentioned it earlier, and I love it very much. Charisma on demand. Yeah.
Great
Hey, that's the
name.
title you're going to use. You should use that. Definitely use that title. I think, actually, I think, and I'm actually not some people who meet me might not understand this. I'm actually not an extrovert. I have learned to become an extrovert on demand. And so when I said charisma on demand, I can become, if I need to be, depending on the situation, a little bit more charismatic when I need to be. But I'm very happy to be by myself and I talk to anybody most of the time. And so I think for people who are like me, and when I, looking back years ago, I realized that if I wanted to have a chance of succeeding in business and life, before I was married, if I wanted to find a wife, then I needed to open up. I needed to be pretty good at communicating, listening, communicating, and just being able to put myself out there. And I think the idea, going back to what we're talking about, of charisma on demand is something that has been a very central theme in my life.
Yeah, it's funny, right? People also laugh when I say that I'm actually not an extrovert. I am an introvert, but you said on demand. So I've learned also because of the work and the surrounding and the life that just brought me to where I am right now, just exposure, right? A lot of it. And so I have to adapt. It's really hard to be a leader if you're extremely introvert and want to make a difference, want to influence people and so I learned as well, but I get most energy and I'm a deep thinker, so need my space to think, just be at home, recharge after events and things like that. I get totally exhausted going to networking events. So it's a funny thing that you just brought up.
Yeah.
It is funny, and I mean, communication. I think my own experience, and also from the advice that I've gotten myself elsewhere, and also during my time in the military, where you're forced to learn to communicate, no matter how introvert you are, is that communication is a muscle, right? That needs to be worked out. It needs to be trained. And I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who said that if you want to be better at bench press, it's very simple, right? Do more bench press. And the same thing here. If you want to be better at communicating, obviously seek out the literature. Learn about it on a theoretical level, but also seek out opportunities to communicate with other people, right? Whether it's join a debating society or it can be as simple as that. Force yourself to work out that muscle is at least the advice that I received many years ago and which I did follow. So I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I think many of the people going to university in Vietnam, if they don't feel that their communication muscle is being worked out enough, then I'm sure there are ways to train this, right? For instance, going to debating societies.
Yeah, it's funny that you said about the muscle. Actually, I'm not sure if you saw. I had the boot camp this weekend that is called Identify and Overcome Your Fears and Build Confidence. And I talked about the muscle that we need to build, right? The confidence, the courage muscle. So I told them that, yeah, normally when I go to social big networking events, it's mainly, actually, maybe I'm not sure if I should say it, but it's mainly to build and develop my courage muscle. And what I've tried to build this habit of doing one thing that scares me every day, that is outside of my comfort zone, just to be more confident and be okay with being uncomfortable, right? So I like to do that, and we had just like some funny pictures of the different fears that most of us all have, like fear of failing, fear of being judged. That's why sometimes like communication can be so hard. People want to communicate, but what's really holding them back is sometimes not the lack of skills. Maybe they have it, like the competence, but they have the fear of being judged. So they hold themselves back from communicating or expressing this or sharing, put themselves out there. So sometimes it's not about learning a skill, communication skill, but it's more building your confidence, understanding what fears you have, what's really holding you back from
Right.
achieving your goal.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's running deeper than that, right? So it's more of a root cause thing. That if you sort of start healing that root cause or that lack of confidence, then communication in itself becomes easier. I think you're absolutely right. At least I agree absolutely. So interesting. I just wanna go back to something you said earlier, where we talked about sitting in an interview and figuring out people communicating their value, people communicating who they are. I think also something that I would wanna hear if I was listening to this podcast is, let's say that you're interviewing somebody for a job, right? And you're of course very much tapped into trying to figure out what type of soft skills do these people have and what kind of soft skills do they lack. Is there something that you just should not say during a job interview, something that you would regard instantly as a red flag in terms of trying to spot weaknesses, soft skill weaknesses or communication weaknesses, something that I should never say, something that would be a red flag for you?
Red flags. Yeah. One of the things that I also teach is unconscious bias. So I'm also really aware of, trying to be more aware of when I'm biased in certain situations. I
Mm.
would say like toxic things to say or talking something, what's the word? If you say something bad about your excuses or reasons, talk bad about your former bosses or something, that would be something that is would put me off and think, okay, we have something here that is not just about it's bad habit or a mindset thing or attitude, right? That is something that can be harder to influence or shape. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Maybe
so
a future
yeah,
boot
sorry.
camp can be, oops, sorry, Alex. Just saying maybe a future boot camp could be things not to say or things that can be off-putting at job interviews. I think a lot of times people can have, I would guess, right? You could have a great interview and then right at the end say one or two things that completely turn the atmosphere or change the feeling of the interviewer right away just by saying a couple of things that are just show maybe lack of judgment or just a kind of a negative characteristic about that person. And I think if job seekers can go in and know exactly things to kind of stay away from or absolutely not touch upon, then at least they could hopefully improve their odds of winning a job interview. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, good idea. Things not to say in a job interview. I think sometimes it's also come from maybe not a really evil place, but just like innocently, right? Like, oh, it was just like
Right.
I had a bad day today and I just kind of want to vent, but maybe that's not the right time to vent during a job interview. So yeah, I think that that could be helpful for a lot of people. So thank you for the idea, and Lam. And the reason why people, like you said, a character or something like that, people, HR people especially, they're very concerned, right? Is this person a cultural fit? How are we able to create positive, healthy work environments? If, let's say, for example, we hire this very competent person, but they tend to have some dark sides or negative judgment or comments or things like that, all right? Attitude.
Absolutely. You can, again, blind spots, right? That, we might have a tendency to say certain things that we think are harmless, but in a job interview and setting might, work against us in terms of, how we come across and how we could potentially hurt or harm the cultural fit of that organization.
Absolutely,
What
yes.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. In the work that you've done so far, have you become increasingly more optimistic about the future of the Vietnamese worker in Vietnam and their place in the global workforce?
What do you think my answer would be? I ask you back the question.
I, I hope the answer is positive because I'm a big. We are all here big believers in the massive potential of Vietnam to not, I don't want to say integrate, but to achieve and carve out a bigger piece of that the pie in terms of the global work opportunity. I know that Vietnamese people again have the talent. They're extremely optimistic. They're willing to do the work. And for the most part, I believe that they are open-minded and more than ready to work on whatever weaknesses or whatever areas, blind spots they have to better their chances. So I think that overall, I would say it's a positive feeling that you would have.
Yeah. 11 years of working with Vietnamese, okay, and Cambodian people as well. I see a lot of potential and opportunities. And I think what you guys are building right now, opening doors and opportunities for Vietnamese people is so great because sometimes they have the potential, but if nobody spot or discover them, it's hard, right? So right now you're opening up a whole world for them and they can actually dream bigger, right? Maybe some of them are really like, oh, confident and they have big dreams, and they go for it, they explore, but we still have a lot of people who have the competence and the potential, but they don't see that, oh, I can't really see, So, but when they get exposure to that and they see, wow, I see now it's much easier. I have access to so many opportunities, my career, I can build on it. I can dream bigger now. I can seek to learn more skills so that, I can add more value and I can achieve bigger, I think it's really inspiring because what you do is you create this platform and community for people to do more and become more, right? And I think this is going to be the fun part of really having so many people realizing their potential that they didn't even know exist.
I think a lot of what we want to do and what we are doing is focusing on community. I think if you're by yourself in your little room at home, trying to dream, trying to dare to dream bigger, it's very hard. But if you can see other people who are in similar places as you, maybe job wise, career wise, and they might be just one step ahead. It gives you some perspective that it's okay to dream bigger. She is just like me, but they're daring to do something bigger. And maybe I should give myself some permission to also dream bigger. I think community is very important. I also think that within the community needs to be people who are 1, 2, 3, 4 levels ahead that can reach back and say, hey, here's my hand, grab my hand. I'm going to take you forward. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. You're going to do things that you're not quite comfortable with, but it's okay. I've been there and I've done it, and you should and can do it too. And so it's different pieces working here, right? Community of people who are a couple of steps ahead, community of people who can reach back and say, hey, this is what I did that worked. This is the mindset I had to learn that helped me step over this self perceived conflict or problem that I had in my mind. This is the game plan that I followed that ended up bringing me to where I am today. People need to see other people doing it. People need to see some ways to do it. And people also need encouragement. We all need encouragement. Even people who have done great things, it always feels good to hear, hey, you're doing a great job. That's something that is part of human nature, right? We always need to hear some kind of voice somewhere that say, hey, you're right on track. You might be having a bad day, week, month, year, but you're right on track. And if you keep on going, great things lie ahead of you. And so that's what we're trying to do here at VietAssist. I know that's what you're trying to do with your work, Lan. And I think, again, you talked about people and building people. And I think if I would add one last thing is the only appreciable asset in any organization is the people. So if you're not investing in people, in their minds, their happiness, the culture of a company, if there not is a clear and proactive investment in the people, then you can't. I've lost words here. You can't expect to continue to grow and see continued results in what you're doing. And so that's what we're doing here. We're really big on the idea of building people. I talked to you before that, all of my social media handles is stacking skills. And, I'm a big believer in constantly learning and growing. And if you don't have a game plan to learn and grow, then, they say, one of the great sayings is if you're not actively moving forward, then you're also actively moving back. If you're not taking a step forward, you're taking a step back.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, so we actually try to encourage people, but also now these days, if you're not moving forward, you're actually falling behind, right? So there's
Right.
no choice. It's only like forward or fall behind. So I think
Yeah,
this is a great means for people to help people move forward so they don't fall behind. And what you said, I so much agree with you, is really you try to build a community so everyone can encourage each other and they can see, oh, other people have already reached the next step ahead, right? So if they can do it, I can do it too. Yeah, it's creating like these mirrors or role models or what you want to call it, right? But I think sometimes we need to see that, oh, have anyone done that before? Because then I believe I can do it too. But if I don't know anyone who ever did it before, then there's a more room for doubt and imposter syndrome, I believe.
100%. I think, what you're doing is fantastic because I think a lot of Vietnamese women are coming to terms with their potential. They want to do more. They want to breathe more. They want to take care of their families and build careers. And they need role models like yourself, which is why, Alexander and I, really excited to get on the podcast with you today and continue to get to know you better. Because I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think, again, potential without guidance, potential without community, potential without a coach to tap into that and help people maximize that potential, it leads to a lot of wasted potential. And I think the work that you do to uncover, to nurture, and to kind of like you're. I think if you weren't a coach in this life, you'd be a gardener, because essentially, when I think of what you do, it's kind of like you're gardening, you're clipping the branches, you're building a forest of the future of Vietnam's workforce. And I think, and here's something I want to add, that it's not going to be easy. And I think if people expect it to be easy, then they're already getting off on the wrong foot, as we say in America. Expect it to be hard, expect it to be uncomfortable, but just know that it's worth it. It's actually, I think if we try to downplay the work that's involved in improving your life, as the world has begin to open up, and Vietnamese people are now presented with opportunities to work internationally, just know that means that there's more competition, that more people are going to be fighting for their job. So expect to be that understand the rules of the games have changed. You have to become more competitive. You have to add more value. The cool thing is you can do all this. You can learn the skills. You can become the person that you need to become. But know that it's not going to be easy. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. So
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because and that is so important to say, like if people, they only expect it to be easy, they want to dream bigger and they don't know that it's going to be challenging. Maybe it's, is again managing expectations, right? As soon as they hit the first obstacle, or then they will feel very discouraged and say, what the, I didn't expect that, nobody told me that it was going to be so hard. So, but yeah, like you said, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and with guidance, with mentors and community, I think they can get a lot of help and get ahead
100%.
faster.
I was
Yeah, I
thinking
think
one of your future boot camps can be this whole imposter syndrome. I think a lot of Vietnamese people suffer from that. I always suffer from that. I continue to suffer from that. But that's
Me
maybe
too.
something that would be interesting to put together in the future.
Absolutely.
well, of course, a little bit of imposter syndrome is also, I mean, it is a healthy state of mind, also in the sense that you have some skepticism and you also look at yourself with some level of criticism and say, am I good enough? Should I spend a little bit more time improving myself? The problem is, of course, when it tips over and becomes a weakness. And I think what sums all of this up is as always, we all know this, everybody who's ever acquired a skill or ever, achieved any goal in life will know that, nobody can walk this path for you, right? Nobody can take this journey for you. But what we can do and what we're aiming to do is to give people the guidance they need and give people the information to know where they're going and how they can acquire the skills they need to acquire, and maybe even provide them with a means of doing so and the guidance, right? But people need to realize that nobody can take this journey for you or walk this path for you, right? So this is, of course, the realistic component to this mindset that needs to be a part of all of it. Cool. So, let's move on to the 5 and 5, where I would like to ask you 5 questions in roughly 5 minutes, Loan. And I just want to, as always, just real quick mention for the viewer or the listener that, if you want to listen to the entire podcast where some of these things are elaborated upon, the podcast will be published on all of our social media platforms, completely free. So go listen to the podcast if you find any of this interesting. But otherwise, without further ado, the 5 and 5. Loan, are you ready?
Yes.
Great. All right. So you've worked across different cultures in Europe and Asia. What's the most important lesson you've learned about bridging cultural gaps, especially for young Vietnamese professionals wanting to succeed in Western companies?
People skills, connection. You can be very smart. You can have great communication skills, presentation skills, negotiation skills. But if you lack the ability to really connect with people, like building meaningful relationships, professional, personal relationship, right? That would be the game changer for you, whether you will be able to build allies and get support to help you achieve the goals, or people will just do one task for you and they don't want to deal with you really, right? Then it becomes a lonely journey, your well-being goes down, and it's not fun really to go for bigger goals and really work, right? Which is every day. So connection, genuine care, interest in people you work with, your bosses, your peers, or your subordinates, direct reports, genuine care, interest in connecting with people, listening to them, care about them, wanting to nurture the relationship and work really, really well with them, right? Like, so even though you would change careers later on, but those connections you will build and develop will be long lasting, right? And I think before we all die, I think what we will look back and be proud of is, wow, I had a life with really great connection, which was really meaningful.
Right, right. All right, so in your book, you talk about building dream teams, right? So what's the number one piece of advice you would give to young Vietnamese professionals looking to lead or be part of successful remote or international teams?
For young Vietnamese to work for international teams?
Yeah, so the number one piece of advice for a young Vietnamese professional looking to be successful when working with international teams.
Related to something that we already talked about before is the proactivity and leaning in, right? So they can be independent, they can be proactive, speaking up. So related to confidence as well. And I think this is the way to go, not what the typical or what maybe they have heard how you should behave when you are working, in a corporate world, but actually in the Western world, it's more like being more proactive, creating the trust and adding the value, so being dynamic and flexible.
Great. Okay, so if possible, can you also tell us what was the biggest challenges you faced when moving from Denmark to Vietnam, and how did that experience shape your leadership and coaching approach?
Imposter syndrome is definitely one. So having to regulate my fears, insecurity, building confidence, at some point applying fake it till you make it, trying to sound smart and confident and with authority as a very young manager. I think, but really listening skill is really important and being respectful. So in any new organizations, when you're new, even if you have been working there for a long time, being able to listen well and showing respect will get you a really long way.
For young Vietnamese professionals who aspire to work remotely or with international companies, which soft skill do you think is the most crucial for standing out and thriving in today's competitive global market, if you had to mention one?
I'll probably say the same thing that I already mentioned, right? People skill, communication skills, listening skills, yeah, collaboration skills, people skills, the same.
What is one mindset shift that helped you achieve success? And how can young Vietnamese talent adopt a similar mindset to reach their own career goals, whether in Vietnam or abroad?
Growth mindset. One of the things I also teach in my workshops is the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And this is also something that a lot of Vietnamese really value and benefit from. Because the way, based on my experience, when I work with my participants, it seems like many of them still have a fixed mindset. So, for example, intelligence, or the way that they deal with setbacks and difficulties, even though they are very intelligent, should they continue to develop and improve and learn new things? Yes. So many of statements that where they choose actually the wrong thing and not the really open mind and growth mindset statements. So this growth mindset is the one that I highly recommend that help myself, because when we have a growth mindset, we deal with challenges, the way we deal with failures and setbacks will help us to become more resilient. We know that it's just, for example, part of the journey and achieving success. We need to try, we need to fail, we need to learn and make mistakes, right? So all with the end focus of growth mindset, where fixed mindset is, oh, I failed. It's because I'm not good enough. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe I should do something else. So it's not resilient, right? So over here with a fixed mindset, we people can give up much more easily. They get stuck in failure, really hard to get back on track and keep going. They don't seek or embrace challenges because ugh, it's too much effort, it's too hard, it's too difficult. But when you have a growth mindset, it's all about learning, it's all about improving. When you deal with challenges and setbacks, you know, it's just a reminder, it's just learning, and I need it to become better and better and better. So I would say growth mindset, learning about this. And for the listeners here, if you are curious, is Dr. Carol. I think she's a professor of one of the Stanford or one of the universities. So she was the one who came up with this concept, growth versus fixed mindset. And it's really, really helpful. And it's also a hot topic these days for corporations looking for training for professional, especially in this this time where there is a lot of uncertainty. People, professionals need to be ready and be prepared that change can happen all the time, right? So we need to be more resilient. We need to embrace and seek challenges, seek innovation, seek changes, and always be better and do better.
Thank you so much. Great. So I think we'll end this podcast episode here, Loan. Thank you so much for your time. I just, again, for the sake of the viewer or the listener, I want to mention that, again, if they're interested in these things, effective practical tools that leaders can apply to achieve outstanding results, for instance, go for, they should seek out your book, obviously, Powerful Leadership, How to Build Dream Teams. And also, if people want to seek you out for your counsel or for your coaching, or where should they go and find you? What is your preferred social media platform? Or
Yeah, probably on LinkedIn and Facebook are the two main social media I use. Yeah. So hopefully we can get connected on those. And I put a lot of try to put a lot of value out there and post. Yeah. So
yeah, I
I
We'll
hope
make
follow.
it's
sure
valuable for
to
everyone. Yeah.
we'll make sure
Yeah.
to add your Facebook and as well as your LinkedIn handles at the bottom of the YouTube video, so people can find you quickly.
Yes, we will. Perfect. And Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and have this great conversation. Really, really valuable for us. A lot of new information for me in general, and I think definitely for the viewer or the listener as well. Anybody has anything more to add? Otherwise, we'll wrap this one up.
No, like I just posted something today, like 10 hour with the right people will feel like 3 minutes or something. And this is what I feel today with the right people. Time goes by really fast, right? So it's almost 2 hours, but I wish we had another 6 hours. We can talk about this next time.
I think the way to solve that problem would be to invite you in for a future episode. That we might have to do that. We might reserve the I was about to say reserve the right to do that. I don't know if that's the right expression, but but we'll do that. We'll probably, I think I can probably promise you that we'll get together for a future podcast episode as well. So yeah.
No, just want to
Thank you
say
so
thank
much
you
for your
for
time, Ron.
having me. Sorry,
No, the
Emma.
pleasure is all ours. Thank you. I was going to say the pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much for being excited to get to today, so we could get on podcast and have a more one-on-one chat with you and learn more about your background and where you come from and what you're currently doing today. I know that a lot of the women in the community are going to be instant fans of yours and reach out and connect with you. In the future, by the way, when we have the stacking skills section of VietAssist, would love you to be able to get on there as one of our experts and build your own community within the VietAssist community and interact and get to know some of the people on there. That'd be great.
That already sounds exciting to me. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Sure thing.
All right, with that, we'll let you go and have a great day.
You
Have a
too.
great afternoon, I guess, afternoon to evening in Vietnam.
Yeah. 5 hour difference.
Absolutely. Thanks again,
All right.
Ron.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, day for you. You still have a whole day ahead of you. So enjoy
We
it.
do,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye, guys. Bye, bye.